Hello everyone, my name is Niall Crabtree from Crab Studios, and today I am bringing you another design video for Food Time Battle in Space. Now before we get on to my game and before we get onto the whole video, I'm first going to do this sort of news segment where I talk about the recent Kickstarters I backed, because usually I back around 4 or 5 per month, so I thought it'd be good just to take you through what I think is pretty cool on Kickstarter at the moment. Right, okay, so there are currently 4 projects on my Kickstarter profile, which I have backed. So I backed 53 in total. I just started backing them, really, since I joined in March 2019. I backed a few others on other accounts, but this is what I backed on this account anyway. So the main two actually, which I want to talk about out of these 4 games that I have backed, but are still currently being funded, Creature Comforts and Wizard and Relics. Oh wow, okay. I just found out something. Okay, cool. Yeah, so what I just said oh wow about is that I did not think at all that Wizard and Relics was going to get funded, but I'm very happy that it did. It was about 50% of the way through its total funding required, halfway through the campaign, which wasn't a good sign, but I'm very happy that it got funded. But Wizard and Relics is just a very, very quick game. It's a very quick card game, which is something that we at Crab Studios really love because that's what we make as well. And I was very confused and a bit disappointed at how poorly the campaign was doing in terms of funding. So I publicized it everywhere. I went on all the Facebook groups, tried to build up a bit of publicity for it, and hopefully that helped towards getting it funded. But yeah, Wizard and Relics is really, really cool. But I think the MVP of these 4 games is definitely Creature Comforts. Only because I prefer to design mechanisms. I prefer to think about the game design itself. But what Creature Comforts has done incredibly well is they've mingled theme and design perfectly together. The whole point of the game is to try and create the coziest winter home you possibly can. And that wouldn't nearly work as well if it wasn't for the incredible art behind the game. All the creature comforts, all the things that you craft and gather resources for, they all look very, very cozy and make you'd want to have them in your home in real life. And as winter's coming up, it's just perfect. Everything's come together, and Creature Comforts is just the perfect campaign and the perfect game for this time of year. But also just the theme and the design coming together, it's the best I've seen, honestly, of design and theme just mingling perfectly together. So if you haven't backed Creature Comforts, I definitely recommend checking it out. But now, anyway, let's move on to the meat and potatoes of the video. We are going to be talking about my upcoming game, Food Time Battle in Space. Now, Food Time Battle in Space is a very quick card game. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes to play, probably a bit longer when you are playing it for the first time. And the best way to describe it is that it is a strategic card drafting game. I've done a brief overview of what the game is already in my previous video. If you haven't seen it, make sure to check it out. It's a bit of a different format to this, but essentially you have 25 cards per restaurant deck. The game comes with a base 4 restaurant, so it's a 2 to 4 player game. The 3 types of cards you have is you have a chef, you have all these different types of ingredients, and you have all these different types of critics if it focuses. There we go. And the reason why I'm telling you about these individual details about the game in a video that's not really about every aspect of the game is that today's video is all about designing a core mechanism for a board game from start to finish. This game has been in development for well over a year now. So I just wanted to take you through step by step of how I discovered what the core mechanic was and how I refined it until it was perfect. So yeah, again, just to give you a brief overview, in this game you want to get 5 stars. That's your goal. You want to become a 5-star restaurant before everyone else. You get stars by completing critic orders. And here's a star rating that you get for this one, so you get a full star, and you complete it by placing down the number of ingredients stated there in the correct order. So, as I said, this is a card drafting game, so that is our core mechanic. And the cards that you draft in this game are ingredients. Like I showed you before, these ingredients. Now, What's the most interesting part about card drafting, about dice drafting, are the limitations to these drafts. Take the game Sagrada, for example. In Sagrada, you have double plus 1 the amount of dice to draft from than the total amount of players. What that means is, say for example, there are 3 players playing the game, that means you would have 7 dice total, because 3 times 2, so double the amount of players, is 6 plus 1. And with Sagrada, there are 3 limitations. The first one being you can only pick up 2 dice total, and the second one being you have to do it in a specific order, and the third one being is that you pretty much have to pick up every single dice that's in the drafting pool apart from 1. So your choices are very, very limited. Now, how this promotes great gameplay is that you have to think about what other people are doing. You have to go, is that dice actually worthwhile for me to pick up? And if it's not that worthwhile, should I instead look at a dice that someone else might be really, really wanting? If I can't help myself, I can maybe hurt someone else. And these choices, this emergent gameplay, all comes through limitations. So far in Food Time Battle in Space, what I have is I have a game goal, the 5 stars. I have the sub goal, which is achieving stars through completing critic orders. And now I need to come up with a cool limitation which will make that harder and will promote decision making. And so I came up with 3. The core one, number 1, is the hand size limit of the player. So the hand size limit in the game is 3. That is your default hand size limit. So say you're trying to complete that order that we said before, the one with 6 ingredients, then you would have to pick up 3, and you would have to place them all down before you could pick up another 3. Which means that you would have to rely on a bit of luck in order to pick up another 3 cards that were all higher than the highest played card that you just placed. Okay, let me just give you an example of what I mean by that. So say if is this a 6? This is the 7. Okay, either way, it doesn't really matter. So say I had that 7 there. Then I would shuffle the ingredient deck, pick up 3 cards at a time, because 3 is our hand size limit. That's actually a really good start. And because of the rule that you can only draw more cards if your hand is empty, I would have to place all of these cards down in my cooking station first, in sequential order. Then I will pick up another 3, and I can only place down cards which are higher than 6, because 6 is currently our highest value ingredient. Which means that I place down this 8, and because of the rule again that you cannot draw unless your hand is empty, and because I cannot put these 2 cards down, that means I would fail the order. So that limitation of only picking up 3 cards at a time is a doozy. It's the crux of the entire game, and it's what the entire game is based around. It's what it's built upon. So I had that foundation very, very early on. If we go back to an older version of the game, if we go back to this older version of the game here in which the card backs were floopy-doo for some reason, the crux of the game was still there, so I'd always pick up 3, the art wasn't there at the time, and then I'd place them down. And I'd pick up another 3, and I could place down the 11, but that was it. And the other limitations are sort of like basic ones that you'd find in any card drafting game. There's visibility, so I actually don't know what cards I'm going to be drafting because they are face down in my deck, and there is also the deck size. These 2 sort of have never really changed. As you can see here in this game, there are, like if we look at this deck here, because I haven't messed about with this deck, there are 12 cards in this deck. In the final version of the game, there are 12 cards. That never really needed changing. So, there we are. We have our core mechanisms, but that doesn't necessarily make a fun game. And I'll tell you exactly why that wasn't the case for this game in particular. So luckily enough, I managed to keep hold of and save every single version of the game that I made on Tabletop Simulator. And you might be asking why I made all these versions on Tabletop Simulator rather than real life. We'll get onto the real life stuff in a minute, but it's because of the current pandemic. I couldn't playtest the game any other way with my friends or with any people online or on our Discord server. So I had to make versions on Tabletop Simulator. So the first major difference between the final game and this version of the game, which is one of the very first ones, this was made I think over 6 months ago, is that the cards that you drew, the orders, were completely random. And not only were they completely random, but they were also communal. And there are two major issues with this setup. The first being because they are completely random, you lose a lot of control with the balance of the game. So say for example, you completed that 3. Say like you played 3 cards and you completed it. Then you do another one and you got a 5. Now a 5 is a bit easy, but a 5, 6 and a 7 is not easily completed. Let's see if we can try and complete that 5 right now. So say I drew 3 cards, I played down that 4, 9 and 11 because I had to, and I picked up 3 more. And there we go, I'd failed the order on a 5, which is relatively easy as well. Now the problem with that is that we can keep going round and round and round, and because those cards stay there, everyone will just keep failing, and that's not very fun. However, I'll show you with the real life cards actually, instead of going backwards and forwards between the version on the tabletop. So in real life, what you have is you have 3 separate levels of critics. You have level 1, which are these cards. You have level 2, which are these cards. And finally, you have level 3 as well. And what this allowed me to do is, not only did it allow me to control the way the game would play out, because I could control the way the game played, I knew for a fact that every single game, players would have easy cards to complete in order to build up their engine. And once they built up their engine, I also knew that they definitely had harder cards to try and complete with that engine. And this came from not really changing anything about the game, just the way it was set up. And on top of that, the individual decks also allowed me to design purpose-built decks. And all these changes just came from this version of the game. Me and my friends were just playing around and around the table we went, trying to complete just a single card, and we couldn't. And it was sort of fun, the fact that we just couldn't do it, and we were just constantly drawing, going around the table, trying to accomplish it. And it wasn't fun in terms of like the game wasn't really fun, but it was just fun of the idea of one of us actually completing this impossible task. But yeah, anyway, so from the get-go, really, the communal customers were scrapped, and also the idea that all the critics were sort of in one deck were just completely scrapped. Yeah, so then we got to this version of the game. Yes, I know, all the card backs look like weird patchy cow skins for some reason. I don't know why. But yeah, at this point we hadn't really made it to the point where we had synergistic mechanics in these individual decks. They were all still roughly the same, and they were all still kind of random. So if we take a look at a specific card, as you can see here on these 3 cards anyway, is that there is a little shield in the top right, which isn't in the final version of the game. Well, what I kind of wanted this game to be at the beginning, which didn't really turn out to be very helpful for the whole design and the whole enjoyment of the game, is that I wanted it to be an engine builder, but also a take that game. And take that engine builder, it just isn't massively fun because of how invested you get in your engine. Now, I've mentioned engine quite a bit, but I haven't really talked about what it exactly is. I'm sure a lot of you know what it is, but in case you don't, it's essentially just a bunch of abilities, whether it's cards or otherwise, that you gain and you have to use at your disposal, and you can use them together in order to achieve something. And usually the more you have, the better your outcome of using them all will be. A great example of an engine builder is the wonderful game by Stonemaier Games, Wingspan. So the reason why this would take that mechanic is that if someone were to use an ability, say for example I use this 9, then other players could use their cards, not their ability, but their cards, to block it. So all they had to do was equal the number on the shield. So I've just pulled the cards from these decks as well, which I'm pretty sure are exactly the same. Interesting. Anyway, and so say for example I use this card, then the player, if they didn't want me to use that card, could choose to use this card to block this card, in which case they would both be dead, and that would be it. It just wasn't really fun at all, really. Especially when you could use a bunch of cards together and then someone could just block one specific card, which made all the other cards amazing, and it just wasn't really a good time for anybody. So yeah, that was a mechanic which was completely scrapped from the game. It didn't really affect the card drafting at all, and it didn't affect the overall enjoyment of the game, and it just wasn't fun. Now this is really the second to last major change or major addition to the game, which has stuck pretty much until the final version of the game, which is the implementation of the chefs. If I just take out the Tranquil Sushi restaurant deck and I show you the chef here, all these chefs have the same abilities, and the reasons why the chefs were introduced into the game was completely so if you didn't have any abilities gained any other way, then you could use the chefs to help you gain those abilities. These chefs are pretty much at the same stage as they are in the final version of the game, except one major difference. So we have the refresh 1 card to if you have 3 or more stars. That is completely, the second part of that statement is completely abolished from the game, because I realized it's just helping people which are already doing good. Draw an additional card, completely unchanged, final in the game. And Butterbean is completely out of the game. Butterbean is a phrase taken from the card game Four Souls, which is a very take that game, and I had that still in this game. Basically, you could use your chef to cancel someone's ability. It's completely taken out of the game now. I'm glad that's taken out. Thanks from the feedback from a bunch of playtesters. That was very appreciated, because I almost made that mistake. But yeah, the chef was just definitely a good decision. It was just a way to get people starting out on level grounds, and also giving them something to do rather than just drafting cards without any control. I wanted to make sure the player had control right from the beginning, even though it's only minimal control. So yeah, now I will get on to how you gain abilities, which hasn't really changed at all since the beginning of the game, but I wanted to get to the chefs before I talked about it. So, for example, with this card, you have, instead of actually showing you the old version of the cards, because I feel like that might be a bit confusing because the art is different, I will instead show you a critic from the Mount Zarella restaurant deck. I will show you a level 1 critic. So, for example, this guy here needs 4 ingredients to complete the order. You get half a star for completing the order, and you need 1 luxury ingredient, which I'll show you what it is in a minute, in order to gain this ability down here, which is draw ingredients until you reach your hand size limit. This is a cool card because let's just show you what it could do in practice. For example, you could draw 3 cards, you could play these 2, and because your hand size limit is 3, you could use it, assuming, let's say this is the card, you could use it and draw back up to 2 more cards, and you can play that, and you can play that. So the higher level cards, you need more ingredients to complete it, but you also need more luxury ingredients in order to gain their ability as well. So for example, with this level 2 critic, you can tell that by the yellow background. It needs 7 ingredients and 2 luxury ingredients, but you do get a full star for completing it. So that's kind of like the tertiary goal of the game. So you have your main goal, which is to become a 5-star restaurant. You have your sub goal, which is completing critic orders in order to gain those stars. But your sort of like tertiary goal is to gain abilities by using luxury ingredients, so then you can complete those more difficult cards. Because completing a 9 ingredient critic, for example, is pretty much impossible without using abilities. You would have to be insanely lucky. I think the highest card I've ever seen be completed without using a single ability is a 7 ingredient card. And even then, I've only seen that happen, I think, twice, and I've played this game for about 200 hours. Now, there is one final mechanism which didn't end up in the game, but it might end up in the game in the future, and that is the specials menu, which is my attempt to have sort of a communal objective which people have to race towards. So yeah, for example, if you completed an order with only even ingredients, and you were the first person to do that, then you would gain the star off of the card. And it was just a way to sort of introduce competitiveness, not only in achieving the goal as quickly as possible, but also trying to get these sort of like mini side objectives as well, which I thought was quite cool. It's kind of what Wingspan achieves in their goals as well. It's very similar to Wingspan in that there are communal goals which you can achieve, which are very beneficial to your overall chances of victory. But not only that, it also helps promote different ways of play. So even though you might have all the cards you need to complete an order, you might end up using some abilities in order to gain more cards, so you have a higher chance of getting enough even ingredients only to complete the card, which might harm you in the long run, but say you only need that extra bonus star to win the game, then it's definitely something you should try and do. But yeah, other than that, that's how Food Time Battle in Space came to be, from the very first introduction to the card drafting mechanic all the way up to how it is now. What's been happening for the past few months is we've been playtesting and balancing and iterating, and if you want to see that process and the highlights from that process, then I recommend checking out the previous video in which we covered mainly that. But yes, Food Time Battle in Space is going to be available on Kickstarter to back in February 2021. I am very, very excited for it. And if you want to stay in tune to this channel, I'm going to be posting videos about every single aspect of the design process, the development process, the manufacturing process, everything that went into making this game how it is now, from concept to Kickstarter to release. So if you're interested in how board games are made, and if you're interested in Food Time Battle in Space, then I highly recommend sticking around and subscribing. Finally, I would like to say our previous game, Blockers the Stacking Game. Here it is. Oh, it's a fancy one because it's still wrapped. Yep, so Blockers the Stacking Game is currently available on Etsy. It is at a discounted price. As this video goes up, the Black Friday sale might have ended, but it is currently still on a discounted price up until Christmas. Because Blockers, I'm very proud of Blockers because it was my first ever board game, but I'm even more proud because of how inviting and how, like, it's such a great communal game, and it's perfect for Christmas, which is why I'm promoting it on this video. So if you want to check out our Etsy store, in which you can buy that game for pretty cheap, then I recommend checking out the link in the description below. But that's it. The only other thing that I want to plug is the Discord, which I've mentioned previously. That'll also have a link in the description. Highly recommend checking it out if you do want to play test, and if you do want to see what other games we're working on, because we are working on other games as well. And it's just a really fun place to be if you like board games and you like talking to other people that like board games as well. So yeah, check that out. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm not sure what the next video is going to be covering. If you have any advice or recommendations, or just what you want to see next, and what you want to know about board game development, then please let me know. But yeah, that's it. I've been Niall from Crab Studios, and I shall see you in the next one. Goodbye.